Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Nice to see everybody here. Welcome to Contemporary Issues class. We are really pleased to have our speakers today, Laura and Emily from Moms Demand Action, a nationwide or maybe international group, nationwide group that has 8 million members and is advocating for gun safety and sensible gun control. So what a timely topic.
Yeah.
So I will introduce them more in a minute. Let's do our usual announcements. Zoomers, welcome. And please mute yourself in the lower left corner of your screen so we keep the background noise down. And we are recording this for future playback too. We have folks who can't attend at the moment but would like to watch it again on replay. So thank you for that. And any other announcements, things going on in church? Or anybody want to share the exciting trips? The Punings have been to Durango and rode the Durango Silverton train this week. That's fun.
Canyon of the Ancients.
Canyon of the Ancients.
Which is west of Mesa
Verde. Yeah.
I thought we needed a t-shirt that said Ancients.
It is the season for travel. Vicki and I are headed to Costa Rica on Wednesday for a family reunion week on the beach. That'll be fun, our first time there. If you have any suggestions for us, let us know. And sure, Gene.
Yeah, we'll be close to Durango. Mary and I are going to celebrate our anniversary in a yurt.
All right.
Ridgeway Range.
Okay.
First time experience. We'll test our relationships if we're in this for the long haul.
Yes.
It's already been the long haul.
61.
Oh. Wonderful. And I want to welcome Harvey Marks to class today, our former pastor at St. Andrew for many years. And in fact, it was probably 10 years ago this month that was Harvey's last sermon here. And this month, Harvey? Good memory. Well, Vicki and I moved here and came to St. Andrew 10 years ago this month on the last day that you preached. So it was our first day here was on your last day preaching. So we've got to know Harvey and Judy since then pretty well. I appreciate all you continue to do. So thanks for coming today for this good topic. Okay, with that, I want to introduce Laura Reeves, who is also a St. Andrew member and is starting a new group called Gun Sense at St. Andrew. And she wants to tell us a little bit about that and ask us what we'd like to do with that also. And then she brought Emily, and I'll let you all introduce yourselves further. But thank you for bringing this topic, and she's going to take questions during her presentation also. And Zoomers also, today we don't have the ability to share screen these slides, so you can hope you can see them on the screen a little bit smaller than you would with a share screen option. But you can hear, hopefully you can hear us just fine too. Okay. So with that, thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, is this helpful?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay,
yes,
great. My name is Laura Reeves. I've been coming to St. Andrew probably about 8 years. And I work mostly, I have 4 little kids and I work mostly in youth. I've attended this class a few times and I really love what you talk about. I love what you're interested in, and your curiosity about wanting to be introduced to new ideas is really phenomenal. I really admire that. And so I felt really honored that Steve asked us to come here today. My name is Laura Reeves and this is Emily, and we are both leaders for this group, Moms Demand Action, for Douglas County. There are groups all around the country. It was started right after Sandy Hook by a woman named Shannon Watts. She was a mom in Indiana that saw what was happening and was horrified and saw that change wasn't happening at the federal level. So she started a Facebook group. She didn't have many friends on Facebook, but those that she had were interested, and it spread like wildfire, which just indicates the need and the desire for change at our level, at the citizen level. And so, like Steve referenced, we're up to 8 million volunteers.
Wow.
So it has grown immensely. And we are bipartisan, we're nonpartisan. We do not want to get rid of the Second Amendment. And also, like Steve referenced, what we want are common sense gun safety reform. We want to be able to do simple things that will make a huge difference and save lives. So that's the overall goal for moms. And you know, unfortunately, our group started here about 4 years ago, would you say?
Right after Parkland.
Yeah, right after Parkland.
Yeah.
And it was pretty small. And unfortunately, with every tragedy that happens either locally or nationally, we get more and more members, which is encouraging because it means more and more people want to do this piece, the action piece. They want to actually use their voices and say this is enough. But it's unfortunate that we've had so many tragedies happen and continue to happen. And so I'm grateful for this community. I'm grateful for this church. We were recently asked to join in with Ceasefires. They have a group that works with different congregations, and our group and Moms in Action, we're going to come in and offer different programming and access to information and allow you all to be able to come here and do some more learning and action with our groups combined. And so we're just starting to define what that might look like, but I'm so grateful for the interest here in St. Andrew. It makes me just very proud to go here. So before I move on, I wanted to just get a gauge for what people are interested in. I have a variety of things we can talk about. We can talk about Colorado legislation. Believe it or not, Colorado has made some pretty big strides, and we are ahead nationally. And so a lot of the things they want to do nationally, we're doing here. So we can talk a little bit about that. We can talk about national federal legislation. We can talk about statistics. I have information on some of the myths. So if you want to have a discussion with people that are coming back at you with talking points and you want to debunk them, we can offer some of that information. I also know I attended a meeting when we were talking about the red flag law that was passed a few years ago, and that has had several years of implementation and it's very successful. We can talk a little bit about that. So whatever direction you all would like to go, I can start going. Yeah,
I'd like to know about those simple things you were talking
Okay.
about.
great.
We can do.
Do you mean through the government or as people?
As people.
Okay, so some action that you can take?
Yeah.
Okay, great. We will definitely touch on that. Yes,
I'd like to find out how many illegal guns are used. I never see any statistics about illegal guns being used in these different shootings.
Okay.
Do we have information about that?
okay, we'll go into that. Yeah. You know, it's a good question because a lot of people will talk about that. They'll say, these crimes are illegal, these laws aren't working, or they'll point to certain cities and talk about them as being the problem. So we'll address that as well, because in all reality, those tend to be dog whistles. There tends to be some racial undertones around that kind of deflection. It doesn't mean that there aren't illegal guns used, but it's a great question. And there is another phenomenon we can talk about called ghost guns, which are guns that people are building on their own. Those are also currently not done in the most legal way. So it's a good question.
Or how about also what the House, US House has passed or is on the verge of passing, and the likelihood that won't go any farther in the Senate.
Yeah,
Might be a good topic too.
yeah. Good news on that. Well, hopefully good news. There is a rumor that we may hear today, one way or the other, as to what the negotiations have brought about.
Yep. They just announced it, as a matter of fact.
Oh,
What did they announce, Susan?
Yeah.
Some of us haven't heard.
Well, let me open it up. I just got a news feed. So it's bipartisan. They have 10 senators It includes support for red flag laws, tougher background checks for firearm buyers under 21, and a crackdown on practices called straw purchases, but not other limits Democrats and Joe Biden wanted. So that seems to be it.
But they had an agreement and they got 10 senators, Republican senators in the Senate, so it might pass. For red flag laws and stronger background check. That's pretty good progress.
And, yeah, and then let's see, for straw purchases.
For straw purchase, which is buying for somebody for somebody who can't legally buy and then giving it to the person. Great, thank you, Susan. Haven't
And they
heard
also
that
have
yet.
all the Dems on board,
I believe so, yes,
like the two.
That's what she's saying.
yes,
Enough to pass it in the Senate too.
Wow.
yeah.
I'd like to ask if you could address anything that would be personal safety for yourselves as you become more outspoken in this effort.
Okay, sure.
Laura, I think one thing I'd like to have some clarification on is the mantra that goes on where people are saying, we don't enforce the laws we already have.
Sure.
And what those are, what the reality or the facts that you can sort out are.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think I have enough information to be able to answer that, but if not, the other thing is if I don't get to something, I will get information back to Steve, and I've got other resources that I will recommend as well.
Justification for having weapons of war that are mostly used for self-protection, hunting, target shooting.
Yeah,
Gopher shooting, I think it was.
yeah. Direction.
Really bad aim.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll do my best to answer that one. That's a tough one for me.
Laura, how do you counter those who say it's all about mental health only?
Okay, we'll touch on that too. Great question.
And
Yes.
this is just for the next 45 minutes?
Well, here's what I commit to. No, I think this is all good, because the thing is, this is such a pressing issue in our lives. It now impacts everything we do. It impacts our safety everywhere we go. And so I do think these are so important. The problem is it does feel overwhelming. And so I'm glad you're asking these. If we can't address all of these, I will make sure I'm getting slides and information to Steve so that you all have those handy. And then, like I said, we're going to be doing more work around gun safety here for the broader church. And so we'll do some programming here around that as well. Moms has a few set programs that we do, not as moms, but just for the community for education that we can bring in here as well. That might address some of these.
Any information that you're privileged to have with respect to the impact of the shootings in the schools with respect to the psyche of the children?
Yeah.
And mothers and fathers?
Yeah.
Do you have any current information on that? It's apparently a major issue right now.
It's an excellent point, especially here in Douglas County. We actually, moms, another thing that St. Andrew is doing for us is our group is a community group and we're all volunteers. So finding space to meet has been challenging for us in the past. And St. Andrews has offered us meeting space, which has been wonderful. And so I'd say about a month ago,
March.
Yeah, March. Yeah, it's gone fast. We gave a presentation to our membership about guns in schools and what this new board has been saying about what they'd like to do with teachers, what they'd like to do with volunteers, what they'd like to do with SROs, just to educate the community, because they've been very hard to nail down on exactly what their plan is. We were trying to educate people and get ahead of it and give people the facts about what is actually safe and what is not safe based on these proposals that they have. And so when it comes to the drills that you're talking about, there's some new data on that to talk about how effective are they really, and is the cost worth the benefit? And so I might do that I'm going to send that data over and we'll try to touch on that. But Emily has a really good presentation on that we could maybe host again here at the church for you all to come, because it's pretty specific. Yeah, but that's a great question. It's very timely. I'm sure most of you know, we had a shift in our school board. The candidates prior had run actually as gun safety, there were some that were running as gun safety candidates. and they understood what safety meant. And more guns does not equal more safety. And so they were really committed to making sure that they were doing the right things, not just the things that made people think were felt safe, you know. And the new board has been a little bit less clear on that. So it's a big concern for us. Yeah. Okay, so let me get started. I'm gonna just give you a brief introduction on some of the facts and where we stand with gun violence today and what that picture looks like. And then we'll start getting more granular, okay? And if you need clarity on anything or you can't hear, just raise your hand and I'll try to speak a little bit louder, okay? Okay, well, and I just wanted to start here. Every meeting that we have, we start with our diversity, equity, and inclusion grounding statement. So I'll read that for you. We'd like to begin this meeting by sharing our statement of intention and purpose. Our intention is to foster a robust presence of diversity, equity, and inclusion of and for all individuals and groups choosing to join our efforts. Our purpose is to work together to decrease gun violence and increase public safety across our nation. In our meetings, events, and activities, we value diversity, we advance equity, and we demonstrate inclusion. We are a community. We are gun violence survivors, including victims, witnesses, change makers, and advocates who come together in partnership to work towards a future that is free from gun violence. And this reminds me, Moms to Main Action was initially started as a group of moms, but as we've grown, we are much more than that. They call it now mothers and others. We have fathers, we have aunts and uncles, we have concerned citizens, we have elected officials, we have gun owners, and we have all political parties. We have people that care about safety. And we always try to be very clear, we are not here to take people's guns. We are not here to destroy the Second Amendment. We are here to work within the law and to make sure that we can prevent preventable deaths, which is how we see gun violence. So these statistics are always overwhelming to me. 110 Americans are killed every day with guns and 200 are injured with guns. We rarely talk about the people who are injured, and that is a lifelong impact. That also impacts everybody who loves them. So I've found that gun violence has this deep ripple effect. It's not just the people who love them, but it's the people who interact with them, their caregivers. So it's a big problem. And we define a gun violence survivor as someone who has been impacted directly through gun violence, either through an injury, someone who is a caregiver, someone who loves them, someone who has been threatened with a gun, or someone who is also caring for somebody in that way. Those are survivors.
Does the blue figure, the 110, include suicides?
Yes, yes, good question. So the next one, this is recent, and I think this is devastating, and I personally consider this a failure, at least on myself. As an adult, firearms are the #1 leading cause of death for American kids and teens. I believe that every single one of those deaths is preventable. And so the fact that that is surpassed every, car accidents is devastating to me. So with COVID, unfortunately, we had kind of an increase in gun buying, which meant an increase in gun deaths. So there was a 64% increase in the number of guns sold in 2020 over 2019. So you can see this, this big spike here, that correlated directly to increased deaths. Suicides definitely increased, but you see their homicides increased significantly. So what do we do about this? How do we center this work? The way we center this work and the way we drive our direction is through focusing and centering survivors, focusing those who are impacted. And those impacts do not happen equally to everyone. And so we've done a lot of work to understand who's most impacted, where are most shootings happening. And we try to make sure that our solutions are directed in those places so that we are getting the maximum impact, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go through a few myths and facts, which may help address some of the questions we had and help show us where a lot of this violence is actually happening. It's not necessarily correlated by what we hear in the media. So This is not taking away from the fact that mass shootings are not significant. Mass shootings are actually increasing, and they are tragic and devastating, and they are a big deal, but they are not, sadly, I wish that was our only problem. It's only a tiny fraction of what our problem looks like. So mass shootings are less than 1% of total gun deaths. All other gun deaths are 99.6%. Think about that. Think about what we hear most of, and that means we're not even hearing remotely the magnitude of what's happening outside of school shootings. So this is the breakdown. This is through 2016 to 2020. So this is the most recent data we have. Homicides were almost at 40%. Suicides, do you see that number? Devastating.
Wow.
And I don't have our Colorado specific data here, but we are one of the highest rates of suicide in the country. We have Moms is part of this group, this umbrella group called Everytown, and they've done an incredible job with research and data, and you can get it very granular. You get it down to the state, to the county, to the city level. So I'll be sharing those websites, but we are not doing well here in Colorado. Another type of gun death that has increased since COVID is unintentional shootings. Can you think what that might include? Any thoughts?
Kids find the gun.
It's fine. I'm done.
Right.
Playing with it.
Yeah. A lot of times you'll hear that as an accident. That's not an accident. That means a gun was left unsecured and a child came across it and did not intend to, but there was a shooting. Police at 1.3, undetermined, is they're not quite sure kind of where to categorize it. And then, as you can see, that mass shooting and school shootings is that low. It's still very high, significantly higher than anywhere else in the world, but this is our problem. Okay, so gun violence affects all Americans equally. I'm sure amongst this group, you know that is not true. So white Americans, we are 62% of the population, but 84% of the suicide victims.
That's mostly male.
Mostly males. Yeah,
Do you know how many of those are veterans?
that is another significant problem, and I do have information on that. I will share that. Yeah, that's another area we really need to do work. Yes, great question. Okay, another just very disproportionate statistics that is also devastating. Black Americans are 13% of our population and almost 60% of homicide victims. It's unacceptable, unacceptable. And so Moms has done a really good job, I believe, figuring out what we do here. How do we?
Does that include police shootings?
It does. Yeah, which is also disproportionately skewed. And so we're working on specific ways to make sure that we are serving specific communities and not going in and trying to push a single solution across the board. Policy and programs don't work and don't matter. So that's a little bit around this thing that you'll hear around, well, we have gun laws, but they don't matter. That's not true. So this is kind of a category of a state or an area. So essentially, a national leader means they're leading in terms of gun safety legislation. And as you can see, their rate of death is significantly lower per 100,000 residents. It's at 7.4. Down here, a national failure, they're at 20 per 100,000. And so when you have more lax gun laws or missing gun laws, or gaps, it results in death. So they do work. There are other statistics that we can pull around states. A lot of times you'll hear people talk about, they'll identify certain cities and they'll say, well, they have really good gun laws in that state, but why is the rate so high? The issue is we don't have consistency federally. So each state or even each municipality can have different gun laws, and we can come across any border and bring guns in. So Illinois, a lot of times you'll hear Chicago talked about. Illinois has very good gun laws. They're in the higher level of this. But Indiana, it's abysmal. It's just a quick, short drive to come across that border and bring those guns in. So that when you hear about illegal guns, that's what's happening. These aren't ones that are typically bought in that area. Last week, there were some congressional hearings on gun safety, and they were talking about the number of guns that come in from Georgia and Florida into New York, also another state with really good gun laws. And so if we don't do this nationally, we really struggle. Another very interesting statistic is Hawaii. Hawaii has excellent gun laws. They actually have a border that works. I mean, not I mean to say a border that works, but it's very hard to cross the border with illegal guns. And they're in this level, the national leaders. Their gun deaths reflect those positive gun laws.
How about Alaska? Where does Alaska?
I don't think they have great gun laws, but we could pull them up. What I love is, I'll show you this link. There's a link called Every Stat, and it gets down to every state, and it shows, it'll give everybody kind of a rating. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, good question. So that's kind of like the big picture. So what do we do as moms? Well, how do we approach this problem? Our number one thing that we do is we really push to pass stronger gun laws and close any kind of loopholes where they might say these laws are not effective or you can get around them. So we try to identify those and push for those in our state houses and locally. We also really try to go with the perspective that this is preventable. And so we know that if we can get these laws in, those deaths will be reduced. We also work in our communities, like today, to talk to our different organizations, to businesses, to churches, to volunteer organizations, to make sure that we're able to teach them about how to be responsible gun owners. And we have a program called Be Smart, which talks, it's made for people that may encounter guns, may either have guns in their homes, and it's teaching them about how to do secure storage, or if you're sending your child into a home where there's a gun, it helps you have that conversation. It also helps parents look for signs of suicide. So that's a separate program that we do to kind of help on the education side. And we're just incredibly committed. I've never seen more committed volunteers in my life. No one is paid. Everybody works really hard. They are at the Capitol, they bring their families, they go to marches, it's a committed organization. So this is kind of what we do. And then these are just some really exciting things. A lot of people will say, we're making no progress, nothing is happening. And that's hard for us to hear because we learned that federal was tough. And so we weren't going to spend all of our time there. We decided to go back to our states and work really locally and make a difference there. And when we do that, we prove that these things work. We get data, we get statistics, and we can take those federally to say, these laws work. The interesting thing is, we can touch on this later, but a lot of these federal things that they just said they would pass, we have here. So we know that these are effective choices. So we fought a lot of bad gun bills, and we got a lot of good gun bills passed. We got 18 of our volunteers into public office into 2021. This program, Be Smart, that I told you, we got 2 million students. They go to schools that have adopted these policies. So what they've decided to do is educate parents on safe storage, specifically around vacations and times off of school. They'll send out alerts to parents reminding them about this. And so they're working not just at a local meeting level, but at a whole district level. And then we actually were getting great bills passed in the House. So I'm very proud of that. And so I'm happy to see some will make it to the Senate. And we launched a fund to go into community groups that are already doing this violence intervention work, and we're helping fund them because they already know their communities, they already know what solutions they need, they just need funding. And so we've also helped with that kind of funding. So those are some recent wins from last year. Let's see. This is more of what we've talked about. So here, if you want to get involved, you don't have to come to meetings. You get to really choose how you want to get involved. And here's some simple things that you can do. And I'll leave a lot of these numbers, but you can come to some meetings and join our team and go to the Capitol with us. You can do things at home, like contact legislators and help inform people. So these are just some like quick things that people can do, and we'll get into more specifics. But what we like to do is we like to meet all of our volunteers where they are, because we know everybody cares about this and everybody has something to offer, but their lives look different. So we've tried to have a scale of how deeply you can get involved. And then these are just some different programs that we have. I talked a little bit about Be Smart, that's the education program. We have another thing called Gun Sense Voter, which you'll hear more about in November or leading up to November, where candidates can send in a survey and talk about what their views are on gun safety, what kind of values they have, what kind of goals they have for whatever legislative body they're entering. And they can get a distinction from us that designates them as a gun sense candidate. And what I'm excited about is we have people, it's only 3 years old, is that right?
Oh,
3 elections old.
Mhm.
And at the beginning, people were a little bit nervous about it.
Yeah.
And now we have people calling us and clamoring for this, including some Republicans. And so to be a gun sense candidate has now become something that people want to claim, which is a huge shift and something I'm really excited about. And then Gun Sense Action Network is a group of people who volunteer to be on the phones and welcome new members or call people about events. And they're people that kind of keep the communication going nationwide. So those are 3 different ways people can get involved. We also have different organizations. So we have a survivor network that is very strong. And what it does is it offers support for people who have been impacted by gun violence. So they've built this beautiful community where they can be together. There are resources to help them. And some people like to do different things with their grief or their new sad kind of being a survivor. Some people like to use that to go to the Capitol. Some people like to tell those stories, and they're incredibly powerful. And so that's kind of that piece about honoring with action. Some people will write about their experiences to try to make people understand the personal impact of gun violence. They'll go talk to legislators, they'll go do media. But this is a wonderful place for people that are considered survivors. And we have a student organization, which is incredible. So they do a lot around educating, and they do a lot around registering voters because they understand what's coming their way and that they can be part of the solution. And then you'll see, this is national, but you'll see around here, and we can maybe bring some of this to St. Andrew. These are some national months that we like to focus on different aspects of gun violence and do education. So in February, there's a Survivors Week. June, we just had Wear Orange. I don't know if you've heard about that, but that's national, that's gun violence education. And we had an event that we were probably expecting 50 people, and we had probably over 250 people come. It was out at a park in Littleton. It was incredible. Several legislators called and wanted to come and speak last minute. It was really amazing. So that's Wear Orange. In September, we talk about suicide prevention, and we start doing a lot of that gun sense candidate work. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and then November, you'll see a lot of our volunteers and a lot of candidates talking about gun sense voting and gun sense candidates. Okay, so I would like to talk a little bit more about some of your questions. Do you all understand what we passed in Colorado? Would you like to touch on legislation quickly? Do you have it? Okay. So this past year, our biggest law that we got passed was called the Vote Without Fear Bill. And that essentially said that you couldn't have firearms within 100 feet of an election site. So that's drop boxes, that's voting centers, and also where they do the work. So where they're processing your votes and counting your votes. And I'm glad they passed it because I've been a poll watcher and it's a little bit contentious. So the idea that a gun could be in the presence makes it much more intimidating. And then this tightened up some of our rules around what counts as something that would you have your gun removed for, like different offenses and felonies. So that was tightening up a lot. So we talked about loopholes or laws that might not work perfectly. That's what that was. That was a correction or an addition to make it more robust. Something else that happened that is happening right now that is so exciting. We're passing things locally. And let me tell you why. Let me go back to this law here. In 2021, we had several laws passed. One that you had to report lost and stolen firearms. Believe it or not, that was not a law. And so then those guns are out there and nobody's looking for them. And if they're found, nobody quite knows who they belong to. Safe storage, meaning It's now a law that you have to keep your guns secure, and there's a consequence if it's not found, if it's found that you aren't doing that. And you've seen some of these cases recently where children have access guns in their homes and the parents are being held liable. It's through laws like this. We expanded our background check, and one important thing that we did here is we closed the Charleston loophole, which at the beginning of COVID, gun laws were seen as, or gun stores were seen as essential, so they stayed open. And there was a rush to buy guns, which we saw in that statistic. There's a certain period of time that a background check has to be completed before somebody passes. If you're outside of that window, they weren't making the person wait, they were getting the gun. Then if it was found that they couldn't have the gun, they'd have to go back and get the gun back. It's a big problem. They call it the Charleston loophole because that's how the gentleman, the person in Charleston got his weapon to go and attack the church in Charleston. So we closed it. We also created an Office of Gun Violence Prevention at a state level under our state health department. They'll be in charge of funding different organizations. They'll be tracking data, and it'll also be going to, it's also a place to be educating states. And they just hired somebody to run that, and that's on its way up. So I'm really excited about that. And then this is the crown jewel right here. So this was passed in 2021, and it's just being utilized right now. Basically, there was a preemption law, which meant that areas could not have stricter gun laws than the state. And if our state was lacking, then your local area was lacking. That is no longer the case. And now several local municipalities are passing stricter gun laws, and it is so exciting. So let me go back and tell you about that. So just last week, Boulder, Louisville, Lafayette, Superior, and Edgewater all went and did proposals for stronger gun laws and passed them. And then Greenwood Village, I got to be part of this meeting. It was discovered that they had a number of residential gun sellers, yeah,
Operating out of a home.
In a neighborhood. And they actually said it was a zoning law. We're not going to do that anymore. They are allowing the ones to stay that are already there, but no new gun sale operations can happen in a home anymore. And then earlier, Denver banned ghost guns. So this is incredibly exciting. Some of the things that they did, I know, okay, so they did ordinances that would pass the sale of assault weapons, large capacity magazines, rapid trigger fire mechanisms, and ghost guns. They raised their minimum age to purchase a firearm to 21 years old. They prohibited the open carry of firearms, and they prohibited firearms in sensitive places like schools and maybe hospitals or. I thought one did a waiting period as well, but that's not on here. Anyway, this is significant. I'm hoping this inspires other local areas to go and do the same thing. I'm hoping this puts pressure on places to become desirable places for people to want to move if they consider Colorado, and it puts maybe an economic pressure on legislators that might not want to do this out of their own values, but maybe out of the well-being of their community. But this is brand new. This is just now happening, and I'm just thrilled to see this kind of action.
Or are those residential gun sales you
Yes.
mentioned, were those happening with or without a background check?
Well, they are supposed to be with a background check. What I learned is that it's not super regulated. I'm sure if there was a violation that they would be fined, but they don't have a ton of oversight right now. That is one thing that we are asking, Moms is asking federally for the government to expand the reach of the ATF and give them more power to be able to do more things like that. We're also asking them, they don't have someone running the ATF right now. And so,
Yes.
yeah, so we'd like them to approve that nomination and, expand their oversight. Yeah.
May I ask?
Yes.
Please. Excuse me. I'm a gun owner.
Yeah.
Am I missing something?
Sure.
And I may be. A gun is a gun is a gun.
What do you
There's a
mean?
big difference between a 22 and a
Right,
Oh, yeah.
AK-47 or an
Absolutely.
AR-15 or whatever.
Right.
Is there,
well, that's what they're acknowledging here. I think they're acknowledging that certain guns have certain capabilities. And so they're trying to minimize the danger with particular guns by reducing those large capacity magazines and these rapid triggers that you can do to change a gun after you bought it. So I agree with you, not all guns are the same. Am I answering your question?
Laura?
Matthew McConaughey's
Mhm.
statement this week. We can't have a new normal
Yes.
that allows, that accommodates murdering children. We can't let this be the new normal.
Right.
And those children had to be identified by DNA.
Yes.
Some were literally decapitated.
That's right. That's right. It's horrifying. It's horrifying. So when you talk about, I don't know if this is what you're saying, but the type of weapon that was used on those children, to me, they are built to destroy. What happened to those children is the intention of those weapons. They worked as intended. And so why do we have weapons like that? That's how I feel. You know, I don't understand the rationale. I've asked some people before, they've said, I love shooting it at the gun range. I need it for my raccoons. To me, that's not, if that's your hobby, I think that's a sacrifice you can make, right? That's my personal opinion.
And by the way, if you live in Highlands Ranch, your new congressman is going to be $10
Yes.
possibly, or I mean, and currently that is his stance, that ranchers needed to shoot pests on the farm. And he actually has an AR-15 displayed in his office,
Yes.
and people come and pose with it when he has visitors in his office.
Yeah.
Laura, we've got about 16 minutes
Okay.
left, and I know folks want to ask more questions
Yes.
too. If you want to leave time for that.
Absolutely. So, do you want to talk a little bit more about the federal legislation? I know we had a few questions about that, or do you think that's a little bit more covered by the announcement?
I think we kind of got it mostly by the announcement.
Okay, great.
If you don't mind, let's let folks go ahead and ask
Sure.
questions. I'll go ahead and start off. I'm all for sensible gun control
Yes.
legislation.
Right.
But I also kind of agree with Republicans who say there should be more focus on hardening schools. That why aren't we talking more about schools having one entrance, whether or not it's a metal detector, but maybe it's double doors that lock? Why, and is there more focus on that? And does Moms That Demand Action think that's part of the solution too?
Do you want to talk about this related to your school safety position or?
Sure.
Yeah, what do you both think?
I would say that that all school security experts are opposed to the one entrance. I know in Douglas County, our last school security officer was opposed to it. He said it created a fatal funnel. So anyone who wanted to commit this kind of crime, I mean, I don't know if you've seen a school, you know, I live right by Chaparral High School, 2,500 kids coming in and out of one door, going through a metal detector. If anybody did want to commit a mass shooting, I mean, when there's a huge line. But we do believe in other kinds of physical barriers, cameras, door locks are incredibly effective. So in terms of hardening schools, and also we are opposed to teachers bringing guns into the classroom and civilians being armed, whether they are, you know, I don't know, custodians or librarians, allowing them to carry. That is dangerous. When you add more guns to a situation, you're going to end up with more gun violence.
Yeah. But I understand what you're saying. So that the physical piece is important. The single entrance isn't the ideal solution. Also for a fire safety issue,
Yeah.
making sure those doors have the ability to lock, that's something that's important, but funneling everybody in is not.
I just wonder why we're not hearing more in the general media about that aspect.
here's my
don't know
opinion.
what the answer is,
Yeah.
but it's just an important part of the problem.
After Columbine, and after every mass shooting, a group of professionals come together and they study what happened. And they study how the building is accessed, who did it, what the response was like. And they've come up with data and suggestions to say, this is the ideal solution. Is it gonna solve all of it? No, but this should offer the maximum protection, or like the most protection we can have. So Moms has a massive report based on tons of evidence and data, and a lot of that data, I will send it to you to send out to the group. It's very, very good. And then we have a one pager that kind of gives some summary. So those things are in it. What I will tell you is this has been going on for so long. Most schools have already done that. So the MLO bond that, I don't know if you were part of Douglas County at the time, but I know Littleton has passed these and Cherry Creek has passed these. A lot of those went to physical security. So I know after the STEM incident, one thing that they recognized was an issue was the communication. So they were on a different system than the rest of the district. So they changed that immediately. And every school, charter or neighborhood school, had the same communication to the same law enforcement so that there was no lag. We also got upgraded cameras. The lock piece has been addressed. So there's been quite a bit of funding and a lot of attention. So most schools do already have these things. There could be more.
Wish we'd hear more about that.
Yeah.
Judy had a question in the back also.
I don't have a question, but I would like to share a recent experience I had just before the pandemic. I volunteered with Reading Partners at a brand new elementary school, Joe Shoemaker. It's near Havana and Parker. And it was an interesting experience because going in, there's no windows in the front of the school, and there's a chain link fence, very high chain link fence all around the schoolyard. And you have to be buzzed in. And then there's an entryway, solid doors. And the receptionist in the office has a camera. She can see you on the camera. And you have to be registered or signed in.
Yeah.
They have to see you through the camera, and then you have to sign in when you go in. But the school is built like a fortress, and it's a brand new school. And I thought it was very different from any school I had ever seen. But I realized the necessity for it. And so I think that could be an example of how schools could be remodeled, the front of the school, the chain link fence, right? Because, you know, we have all kinds of security to go to court, for jury duty, or go through the airport. And we must protect our children. We must.
Yeah.
And it's doable.
Yeah.
And if they can spend all this money, why can't they remodel the schools? Maybe the NRA can do something in schools rather than contributing to Ted Cruz's campaign.
Yeah.
You know?
Mhm. That's an interesting point. I will tell you, my kid's school does have windows. But it doesn't necessarily look like a fortress, but it does have those security pieces where I have to be buzzed in. There's a double entrance. At my kid's high school, I go to a security officer immediately, show my ID. So that stuff is happening in the entrance. And so I think, I don't know, what district was that in? Cherry Creek, yeah. Sadly, because.
Joe Shoemaker Elementary School, it's near Parker and Havana.
Oh,
I don't know
okay.
what district.
Yeah, I think that's right. That would be Cherry Creek, I believe.
That's fine.
Because we
Oh,
had
that is Cherry Creek.
Columbine, our schools actually got a lot of these changes, a lot of these adaptations faster than other parts of the country. So I think a lot of Colorado schools look similar. I don't know if that's been your experience. But I do know that things that they have put in place are based on evidence and data to say this has maximum amount of security. There's not enough data around. I will say though, making it look like a fortress does have some negative impacts to kids. So I think weighing that, I think there's a way to do it without it feeling like a prison, but I do think there's a way to manage some security up there with physical security and some of these technologies as well. The cameras and the communication are huge, I believe. And that signing in, I do as well.
When I asked my question, you said
Yes.
something about dog whistle.
Okay, yes.
What is that? I don't understand what dog whistle is and what that means, that phrase.
Tell me if I'm gonna get this. The way I would describe a dog whistle is a way to indicate to somebody that you're sending a different message than what you're saying. So a lot of dog whistles are around race. And so you'll hear people talk about, they'll use the words city or gang or urban. They'll talk about things like this where they're not specifically saying directly what they want to say, but it sends you kind of a, you know, a dog whistle, you can't hear, but a dog, you can't hear it out loud, but a dog receives it. It's kind of like that. So there are some words and phrases people use to kind of deflect inappropriately from the real problem. So a lot of times you'll hear people talk about Chicago. It's a way of saying that is not a problem here. That is not our suburban issue. That's a city problem, and they will use a dog whistle to infer that it is a problem caused by Black and brown communities, where that is not factual. But they will do that as a way of deflection or to appeal to somebody's discriminatory beliefs or their biases.
So if someone buys a gun in Indiana
Mhm.
and they bring it into Chicago, is
Yep.
that an illegal gun?
Depending on what the gun is. So let's say Chicago bans a type of gun or a type of magazine. So for example, we have magazine limits here. If somebody is using a different kind of magazine, we have banned that here. So that would be illegal here. So yes. Another form of an illegal gun would be the straw purchase that they discussed. The straw purchase is when I buy a gun for Emily and I give it to her. So I'm doing that purchase. It's not, she's not doing the background check. She's not putting it in her name. That's another type of illegal gun that can come in. Somebody else buys it and brings it in, gives it to somebody. Stolen guns could be, a lot of guns are stolen. And then if those are handed off somewhere, that's another form of an illegal gun. And then ghost guns. Does everybody know what a ghost gun is?
You make it yourself.
You make it yourself.
No, sir. No, sir.
Or actually, these 3D printers
Yes.
make them.
Yes. So one thing I will tell you is one of the federal goals was to be able to regulate that more. And so the Biden administration did sign regulation around that all those pieces had to have serial numbers on them, so they were traceable. And I think they were regulating what could be put together and that background checks had to be done on them. And I believe that would get more robust if we had more ATF oversight. And then it's possible that also did the thing they agreed on today have those guns in it?
I don't
Okay.
think so.
And some of the kids are buying individual pieces
Yes.
on the internet. They'll buy the trigger and then they'll buy the handle separately as separate transactions on the internet and then put them together with a YouTube
Yes.
Correct.
video that shows the kids how to do this.
Uh-huh.
And some of them are actually plastic, also plastic
Yeah.
pieces, but they still fire a real bullet.
That's right.
Gene, if I could.
Yeah.
Well, this big issue in all of this is the feeling of safety.
Yes.
Every time there's a mass killing, the gun sales spike upwards.
Mhm.
Being able to defend oneself
Mhm.
is a rationale given by many people who own particularly handguns. Schools are very volatile places because the feeling of safety for teachers as well as students.
Mhm.
If a teacher gives a low grade, or if there's bullying like in Columbine, the anger, the displacement. I heard an Afro-American legislature from Aurora a couple of weeks ago say that, now here's the difference between the urban and the suburban. With gangs in certain urban areas in our country and the prevalence of guns, and as Steve was saying, the ability to construct your own weapon for safety. She was saying that the reason that the kids bring guns to school is to protect themselves, to feel safe.
Yes.
So again, it's this whole issue of being able to protect yourself whether you're in a suburban area and you have a handgun for that purpose, or if you're in the urban corridor and you're going into a school situation where there are gangs and gang culture, to be able to protect yourself. It's like the Wild West, where you had 6 guns so you can protect yourself.
Yeah.
This matter of feeling safe, don't you think underlies so much of this, of why you need to have a gun in America?
I believe it's a belief, yes. I think it's the
You're safe.
inspiration for the sales. I don't know if the statistics would prove out that having that gun does make you safer. I do believe that there is an emotional piece to that. And I think there is a way to have guns safely. But there are also some statistics to say, the more guns, like as soon as a gun enters your home, the likelihood of death or injury does increase.
I've heard law enforcement say to me and to others that you have a gun, they're more apt to use the gun against you.
That's right.
Or you're more likely to use it on
I've heard law
yourself.
enforcement say
than
that.
for self-defense.
The data says somewhere between, about 9 times more likely that a gun you keep in your house will be used against you, a member of your family or neighbor, than it will be used to protect yourself.
I believe the statistic is about 1% of the time people are using that gun, except like in the way they intended to for defense. It's pretty low. And so I agree with what's being said here, that it often is used against you or that someone in your household could use. 80% of the incidents at schools, it's typically a child or a student or a young person, that gun comes from their own home or someone they know. They're not buying that gun. So that's the other thing. It could also be used against others. I guess, sorry, either one.
A basic consideration in this gun problem is the understanding of the Second Amendment. How
Yes,
it came about, why we have it.
yes.
And I've written a paper on that subject. And after the class, I have a few copies here for
Oh.
who is interested in reading it.
Yes,
I would love to read
I
that.
read that too. I think that is a good point, because it's not unfettered guns to everyone at all ages, all types. It's a very good point.
Gene's reference to the Wild West reminds me that in the Wild West, people coming into town would give up their weapons
Mhm.
in towns such as Dodge City
Gun control.
to ensure gun safety.
Right,
And I like the term, by the way, I don't like the term gun control.
right. We don't need
I
that.
think it's a red herring. I
Yes,
think gun safety, and that's Laura, what you've been talking about.
yeah, yeah,
is the way to talk.
yeah, because that's really what it is.
Exactly.
I don't want to tell anybody what to do with their guns, but I would like them to be safe. And I would like everybody around them to be safe. And that's our goal. Yeah.
2 questions. What's the mom's stance on the SROs in schools,
Uh-huh.
the safety resource officers? And secondly, do you advocate for the need for training for people that are purchasing guns? Is that active, something you're thinking about?
Well, yeah, let me touch on the SRO. They don't take a stance, Moms as an organization doesn't take a stance, positive or negative against SROs. The belief is that the more training, the better. And there's an understanding that there can be some, positive things that happen with SROs. What is acknowledged by moms is that different communities can be impacted by SROs in different ways. And so having training around that as well, I think is important. But yeah, I do have information in that school safety report that goes into a lot more detail about SROs. Moms does take a very strong stance against teachers being armed or untrained, like non-law enforcement, highly trained individuals, if that makes sense. Typically, SROs are still part of the police force, so they're still getting active training. Yeah. Did that help?
It's 11:30. We need to wrap up pretty soon, but Nora Lee, go ahead. You can have
Do you
the
guys
last
feel
word.
safe saying what you're saying? I'm dying to know because I have been threatened over stuff that is as small as a bumper sticker.
Yeah. How do you feel, Emily? We live in different parts of town.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I do feel scared, but I feel scared wearing this to my King Supers in Parker.
Yeah.
But I just, I wear my shirt so other people know, so other people don't feel alone.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do feel scared. I do feel scared, but and I think it's such a personal choice as what you're comfortable with. It really is.
Has anyone drawn their gun on you?
No,
Okay.
but we have had to hire security for our meetings because we do get threatened online.
Okay.
We've had elected officials come in, so we've had to call the police and notify them, or I'm sure there have been threats made. I've never seen a gun physically pulled. Yeah, but I do think there's power in numbers. So just like Emily said, I like to be visible because I like to inspire people that it's the more of us that are being open about this, I just feel like it's inspirational people and it gives them a little bit of courage, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not easy in Douglas County. I'll just say that. Yeah.
I just want to say that one of the things that really was a red flag to me when I was watching the beginning of the reporting on the last school shooting in
Yes.
Uvalde was a door left open by a teacher. I don't know if they proved that to be wrong or not. It
They
seems
proved that to not be true.
to not be true.
Yes.
Okay, well, that makes me feel better because when I first heard that, I thought, that's not the day and age we live in.
Right.
I mean, I don't walk into church even sometimes without looking around to see and think, what would I do?
Mhm.
I don't walk into a theater. I don't walk into a grocery store. I don't go anywhere. And I think the days of us being lazy, or maybe not lazy, but not wanting to think about that, that's over. We
Yeah.
have got to be forward thinking about those kinds of things. I mean, where am I and what would I do?
Yeah.
And even talk to our kids about it and our grandkids about it. Because when I heard that open door thing, I thought, yeah, back when I was in school, maybe,
Mhm.
but now I don't open a door like that.
Yeah.
How do you get in? I think you went in through the front door, didn't
I
you?
think, I don't know, to be honest, I don't think any of us know.
Okay.
I think there's a lot being
Yeah.
covered up, a lot being shared, and I think there were a lot of initial things that came out. I do know that one was disproven,
Right,
but I don't know what the security was like there.
right.
But I will say, I mean, that's what we talked about, gun violence being disproportionate. Different areas get different funding, and different areas can use their money in different ways. And so it does leave people more vulnerable and so I do think maybe there were some security things they could have done. I do know that 40% of their education budget went to that police force.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's
But you
not
know,
going
how many-
to,
How many times have you gone into a door or gone out of a door that you knew was gonna lock when you went out and you put a rock there? Or, I've done that before, and, we can't do that kind of stuff anymore.
what I feel when I hear that, and that makes me sad. And I don't,
It does make me sad too.
I can't say that I don't feel similar. I look around things and to me, that's not freedom.
No.
And so I challenge anybody that wants to talk about unfettered freedom with guns. What is the cost? It doesn't have to be this way. I've lived abroad, so I know it doesn't have to be this way. And it's not just the cost of living in America. And so I try to challenge that every time I can, because this is no way to be living. And this is no way to be bringing up our kids. I feel like my generation has failed our kids. I didn't live like this in school. I've never done a gun safety. I've never done a drill. Never. My kids cannot believe that. So that's why I want that to change. And I don't want you to feel that way.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well said, Laura. I wish we had another hour to talk about it because
Yeah.
there's so much to cover in this issue. Maybe you can come
again.
back.
Yeah.
and we can talk some more. And I've also mentioned that I'm probably going to invite the former Columbine principal, Frank DeAngelis, to come speak to us because he's retired now and speaking to many groups.
Yeah.
So he might have a lot to share also.
I just wanted to give two quick suggestions. I'm gonna send a lot of follow-up information to Steve. I'm gonna give you reports and a lot of the data that we didn't get to touch on, the information on that, but I'm also going to give you resources. So if you want to look things up in the future, or you want to see what the latest data is, I'll give you those links to be able to find that. I also brought 2 books that I really like, that I would recommend. Brian, this is called Gunfight, and it was written by somebody that worked at the gun industry, and he talks about the shift, the ties with the gun industry, and then how certain political people are mirroring their advertising. It's not really necessarily beliefs, but it's fascinating. And this is written by the woman who started our organization. Her name is Shannon Watts. I don't know if you've seen her on the news. She's on quite a bit. She's brilliant and very passionate and feisty, and I love it. And this is all about starting a grassroots movement and how she did this. It talks about some of the mistakes she made, some of the wins that we've had, and she is so committed. And the thing that offends her the most is when people say this is hopeless. She doesn't believe this is hopeless. And that's inspiring to us, because sometimes Emily and I talk, at least in Douglas County, we spend so much time playing defense. I feel like we're always fighting. We're never making progress. What I didn't show you were all the bad gun bills that we also have to fight. Our own legislators here in Douglas County on a regular basis bring atrocious bills to the Capitol. And we have to spend time fighting them. And they're ridiculous and it's exhausting. So listening to Shannon and reading these 2 books, I think really helped me understand different sides of this movement. And so I'll send you as much data as you want. You're welcome to get my information from Steve and send me recommendations of things you'd like to see offered here at the church. We can bring different kinds of documentaries. We can do that Be Smart training. And if anybody wants to come to our meetings, our member meetings, our volunteer meetings, we'd love to have you. And I'd really love to have any of you that want to come to the Capitol or speak. If somebody in this room has been listening and realized they may be a gun violence survivor, I'd love to help get you connected with our network and get you support. More people have been touched by gun violence than they sometimes realize. And I don't want it to be normal. I think somebody brought that up earlier. I don't want this to be our norm. I don't. So
We have a sign-in sheet on the table if you want to learn more from us, or if you want Laura's follow-up information. You just sign in on the sign-up sheet out there.
yeah. And
Steve, you will forward the stuff that's.
Yes, I will.
You'll
Yep.
forward it. Sure.
And I know we didn't get to everybody's questions, so if you have more questions or this kind of got something going in your brain that you're thinking about, send it over to Steve, but I will get you probably more data and evidence than you want on that school issue. I think everybody brought up important issues. I will also get the information about the statistics around when a gun enters the home, kind of what happens, but this idea about safety and kids thinking that they need these guns to be safe, it breaks my heart. And I'm not invalidating those beliefs because they live a different life than I do.
Yeah.
I know for a fact a gun isn't the safest thing, but are we lacking in society protecting them in other ways?
Hard issue.
It's really hard.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
work.
Thank you.
Oh,
Bye.
Can I keep this copy? Or can I make a copy?
No, keep it.
I can keep this. Thank you for sharing.